The morning sunlight peeked through the worn curtains of the small apartment as Samuel got ready to cook breakfast for his daughter, Abigail. The delicious smell of pancakes and crispy bacon floated from the cramped kitchen as Abigail, a lively 11-year-old with bright eyes, was sat at the table looking over her school books. Samuel had been taking care of Abigail by himself ever since his wife, Lorraine, died from a heart issue 6 years earlier. Every minute spent with his girl was truly priceless. "Dad, can we please think about getting a cat?" Abigail asked while munching on a piece of bacon, her hopeful eyes looking at him. "All of my friends have cats, and I promise I will look after it. I'll feed it, clean up after it, the whole lot." Samuel paused, giving her request some thought. Their little apartment wasn't really big enough for a pet, and his work as a groundskeeper barely covered the bills. But when he looked at Abigail's pleading face, he felt his resolve starting to crack. "We will see, sweetheart. Maybe we can visit the local rescue place this weekend and have a look around." Abigail's face lit up with pure joy, and she gave him a big hug. After they finished eating, Samuel drove Abigail to Willow Creek Elementary, telling her to pay attention in class and work hard at her studies. "I will pick you up at 3:30, he said, giving her a kiss on the forehead. "Stick with your friends and don't go off on your own." Samuel spent the day working at the grounds of the local park, cutting the grass and tending to the flower beds. It was hard work on his body, but he felt good knowing that he was making the park a nice place for everyone to visit. As the afternoon went on, he noticed the weather was changing and dark clouds started to roll in. The weather forecast warned of really bad storms, so he quickly sent Abigail a text. "Bad storm coming. Head straight back after school and wait for me there." Abigail got the message when she was playing with her friends, Chloe and Megan, on the school field. The girls had been having such a good time that they had lost track of time, and it was nearly 4:30 already. "I have to go now," Abigail said, showing them the message from her dad. "My dad is worried about the weather." Her friends walked with her to the bus stop, chatting about their plans for the weekend. "See you Monday!" Chloe shouted as Abigail got on the bus. The bus journey back normally took about 15 minutes, and Abigail loved looking out the window at the town going by. She felt so grown up being allowed to travel on her own, even though Samuel had only started letting her do it recently. When Abigail got off the bus, the first spots of rain were starting to fall. She walked quicker, pulling the hood of her coat up as the drizzle turned into heavy rain. The streets were mostly empty, with most people having gone inside to stay dry. Abigail hurried along the road she knew so well, her footsteps echoing off the wet pavements. Meanwhile, Samuel finished work and went straight home, expecting to find Abigail waiting for him in their apartment. When he unlocked the door and heard only silence, worry hit him straight away. "Abigail!" he shouted, looking in her room, then the bathroom, then every corner of their small home. Her school bag wasn't by the door, and her trainers weren't where she usually left them. Getting more and more worried, Samuel tried calling Abigail's mobile, but it just went to voicemail. He called Chloe's mother, who told him that they had left Abigail at the bus stop a while ago. Panic took over as Samuel grabbed his car keys and drove as fast as he could to the bus stop, shouting Abigail's name and asking strangers if they had seen a young girl with brown hair and a red coat. The rain kept pouring down as Samuel looked all over the place in the dark. He contacted the police, and they took a missing person report, but they said to wait until the morning because Abigail had only been missing for a few hours. Samuel couldn't sleep, and he spent the whole night walking the streets and phoning all the local hospitals. The next morning brought terrible news. Someone walking their dog had seen something in the river that runs through Willow Creek Park. Detective David Miller and his colleague, Officer Jones, were called to the park to take a look. As they got closer to the water, Miller's heart sank. The small shape wrapped up in a blanket was clearly a child. "Call the coroner," Miller said quietly to Jones, "and check the recent missing person reports." The detective guessed that the body had been in the water for at least a day and a half, and the way it had been left suggested a crime had been committed. When Samuel got the call from Detective Miller, his whole world fell apart. At the hospital, he identified Abigail's body, crying in disbelief and anger. The happy girl who had hugged him just yesterday was now lying still and cold on a metal bed. Miller gently asked Samuel about Abigail's friends, if she had any enemies, or if she had been acting differently lately, but Samuel could only shake his head in shock. The post-mortem showed a horrible truth that Miller chose not to share with the grieving father. Abigail had been badly hurt by a number of people before she was killed. The evidence showed at least 3 different attackers, and the awful nature of the crimes made it clear that this was not just a random act of violence. Back at the police station, Miller and Jones looked through the security camera footage from the bus stop and the nearby area. They saw Abigail getting off the bus and walking away. They also spotted a suspicious black car parked close to the bus stop around the time Abigail would have been walking home. Better quality footage showed the car's number plate and a clear view of the driver. The car was registered to Brian Taylor, a 38-year-old man who lived on the other side of town. When the detectives went to Taylor's house, they found him cleaning the inside of the car in a hurry. "Is this your car, Mr. Taylor?" Miller asked, walking up to him slowly. Taylor looked worried, and his hands were shaking slightly. "Yes, but my brother, Adam, borrows it sometimes. He's 18 and he lives with me." As Miller looked at the car more closely, he saw something lying between the seats. It was Abigail's phone, and when Taylor saw Miller find it, he went pale. "I don't know how that got there," he mumbled. The detectives arrested Taylor for questioning, but he said he had been at work at the time Abigail disappeared. His story seemed to check out, but finding Abigail's phone in his car was strong evidence against him. After a lot of pressure, Taylor admitted that his brother Adam had borrowed the car that evening. Adam Taylor was a troubled young man with a history of getting into trouble and taking drugs. When the police arrived at his friend's house where he was staying, they found him in a panic. 3 of his friends, Jake Green, Leon Bell and Ethan Hall, were also there, and they all showed signs of recent drug use. Under questioning, the truth slowly came out. Adam, Jake, Leon and Ethan had been driving around in the car when they saw Abigail walking alone in the rain. Because of the drugs they had taken, they decided to go after her. They grabbed Abigail, knocked her out, and took her to Jake's house while his parents were out for the night. The details of what happened next were too awful for Miller to tell Samuel. The 4 young men had attacked Abigail over and over again for hours, filming their crimes on Leon's phone. When they realized how bad what they had done was, they panicked and killed Abigail so she couldn't tell anyone what had happened. Her body was wrapped in a blanket and thrown into the river in the dark. Samuel, in the meantime, was overcome with grief and guilt. He blamed himself for not picking Abigail up from school, for letting her take the bus on her own, for every choice that had led to this awful thing happening. He found himself traveling on the same bus route that Abigail had taken, going over her last journey in his mind and making himself suffer with thoughts of what might have been. During one of these painful trips, Samuel heard a news report on the bus's radio about the discovery of Abigail's body. The reporter said that the police were looking into the involvement of a number of people and that the case might be linked to other similar crimes in the local area. That evening, Samuel got a text message from Abigail's phone. His heart skipped a beat as he read, "Your daughter was killed by Jake Green, Leon Bell and Ethan Hall. Jake lives at 63 Oak Street. Adam Taylor was also involved, but he's been arrested. I'm so sorry for what happened." The message was from Adam, who had managed to get Abigail's phone out of the evidence room when the police weren't paying attention. Full of guilt and scared of what his friends might do to him, Adam had decided to tell Abigail's father about the other people involved, without saying who he was. Samuel stared at the message for a long time, his grief turning into something darker. He tried calling the number given for Jake Green, but there was no answer. Driven by a need for answers and to get justice for his daughter, Samuel decided to go to the address in the message. Jake Green lived in a rundown house with his mum, who worked nights at a local takeaway shop. When Samuel got there, the house was dark except for the light from a computer in the basement. He found the front door unlocked and went inside quietly, his heart pounding with fear and anger. In the basement, Samuel saw Jake sitting at a computer, watching the video of Abigail being attacked. The young man didn't seem to care about what he had done, even rewinding parts of the video and laughing. Samuel watched in horror and rage as Jake relived the torture of his daughter. Unable to hold back his anger any longer, Samuel walked into the light. "That's my daughter," he said quietly, his voice shaking with emotion. Jake spun around, shocked. He was smaller than Samuel had expected, probably about 16 years old, with messy hair and spots on his face. "Who are you?" Jake asked, trying to close the laptop. "I'm Abigail's father," Samuel replied, walking closer. "The girl you killed." Jake's shock turned into arrogance. "You can't prove anything," he sneered. "I'm a kid. Even if they catch me, I'll be out in no time." Samuel rushed forward, pushing Jake to the ground. They fought hard, knocking things over and crashing into the walls. Jake was younger and quicker, but Samuel was fueled by grief and anger. The fight ended when Samuel grabbed a heavy wrench from Jake's toolbox and hit him with it, killing him instantly. Breathing hard, Samuel stood over Jake's body, feeling a mix of satisfaction and horror at what he had done. He took photos of the scene with his phone, then looked through Jake's computer for more evidence. What he found made him feel sick. Videos of Abigail weren't the only ones. Jake had recorded attacks on at least 3 other young girls, showing a pattern of terrible behavior. Samuel cleaned up any signs that he had been there, then used Jake's phone to send a message to Leon Bell. "Got a car to drop off across town. Meet me at my house tomorrow night at midnight. Come alone." Detective Miller arrived at Jake's house the next morning after getting a call from the young man's mother. She had found her son's body in the basement and was in hysterics. Miller noticed the violence straight away and started collecting evidence. When Miller looked through Jake's computer, he found the awful videos of Abigail and the other victims. The footage gave clear evidence of the crimes and confirmed that a number of people were involved. Miller also found clues that showed Samuel had been at the scene, including fingerprints and traces of his DNA. Attempts to contact Samuel were unsuccessful, and when officers searched his apartment, they found blood-stained clothes hidden in the washing machine. An arrest warrant was issued for Samuel, but he had already gone into hiding. Leon Bell was arrested at his family's home, where his rich parents hired expensive lawyers straight away and started to come up with a defense. They said that Leon was just a confused young man who had been led astray by older, more dangerous people. The parents seemed more worried about their own image than the seriousness of their son's crimes. At the police station, Miller met with the parents of one of Jake's other victims, a 14-year-old girl called Lily, who had taken her own life after being threatened by her attackers. Lily's father, Frank, was heartbroken and angry that the legal system had failed his daughter. "These boys destroyed my little girl," Frank said, crying. "They filmed what they did to her and threatened to put it online if she told anyone. She couldn't live with the shame." Miller felt the weight of these failed cases, knowing that the courts often didn't punish these awful crimes enough. He had seen too many young criminals get light sentences and then go back to their old ways without really changing. Samuel, in the meantime, had gone into hiding at a small cottage he had rented a few months earlier as a place to get away for Abigail. The cottage was in the hills, away from the town and hard to find. He spent his days looking at the evidence he had collected, planning what he would do to Leon Bell. Using the information from Jake's computer, Samuel found out that Leon spent a lot of time at an old workshop on the edge of town, where he and his friends would work on motorbikes. Samuel went to the workshop, hoping to find Leon or find out where he was. The workshop owner, a rough man called Tony, didn't want to help. "I don't know anything about any Leon," he said, but Samuel could see that he was scared. After Samuel gave him some money, Tony admitted that Leon had been using the workshop for bad things. "He's been bringing girls here," Tony admitted. "Young girls. I told him to stop, but he said he would burn the place down if I told anyone." Samuel's anger grew as he realized how much harm Leon had caused. He showed Tony a picture of Abigail, and the man went pale. "Yeah, I saw her. She was here a week or so ago. Leon had her in the back room for hours." Unable to control his anger, Samuel grabbed Tony and demanded to know where Leon was now. As they struggled, Tony's knife fell out of his pocket, and in the chaos, it went off, cutting one of the other men in the leg. The injured man screamed in pain and fear, begging Samuel not to hurt him. "Leon's got a place by the old docks," he said quickly. "Warehouse 12 down on South Street. He's been hiding there since his friend got killed." Samuel left the workshop quickly, knowing that the police would be on their way soon. He drove to the docks, a maze of abandoned buildings and empty spaces that was perfect for doing bad things. At the cottage, Samuel had been helped by a woman called Jane, who lived in a house nearby and had recognized him from the news. Instead of telling the police, she had decided to help him after hearing about Abigail's death. Jane had lost her own son to a drunk driver a few years earlier and knew what Samuel was going through. "I know what you're going through," she told him as she brought him food and supplies. "The system failed my son too. The man who killed him got 3 years in prison and was out in 2. Jane helped Samuel plan how to find Leon, using her knowledge of the area and her contacts with people who stayed away from the police. She also gave him a gun, saying it had belonged to her late husband. Detective Miller, in the meantime, had found out that Samuel had been at the workshop and spoke to the injured man. The man's description of Samuel's state of mind worried Miller, who realized that the grieving father was becoming more and more dangerous. Miller also found out that Leon Bell had been hiding out in the docks area, and he told other officers to search the area. They found signs that Leon had been in a number of buildings, including places where he had been sleeping and things he had stolen. Samuel eventually found Leon at a hotel on the edge of town, where the young man was staying with a girl who looked even younger than Abigail. When Samuel saw them together, his anger reached its limit. He waited in the hotel car park until Leon came out on his own. Then he went up to him. Leon was arrogant and didn't care about what he had done. "Your daughter was asking for it," he said. "She practically begged us to teach her a lesson." Samuel punched Leon, and they fought hard in the car park. Leon was strong and nasty, but Samuel was driven by grief and anger. When Leon tried to get away on his motorbike, Samuel shot the tire, making Leon crash. Detective Miller arrived at the hotel just as Leon was trying to run into the nearby woods. Miller chased both men, calling for backup as the chase went through the trees and bushes. "Stop running, Samuel!" Miller shouted. "This isn't going to bring Abigail back." Samuel stopped, turning to face the detective. "They destroyed my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "They filmed it, they laughed about it, and they would have gotten away with it. The system protects them because they're kids, but what about my child?" Miller knew how much Samuel was hurting, but he couldn't let him take the law into his own hands. "I know the system isn't perfect," he said carefully, "but this isn't the answer. Let us deal with Leon. Let the courts decide what happens to him." "The courts," Samuel said bitterly. "They'll give him a few years in a young offenders unit, maybe community service. He'll be free before Abigail would have finished school." Leon had been listening to what they were saying while hiding behind a tree. In a last attempt, he jumped out and tried to grab Samuel, hoping to get the gun. As they struggled, the gun went off, hitting Leon in the chest. Miller pulled out his own gun and fired, hitting Samuel in the arm and making him drop the gun. Both men fell to the ground, Leon badly hurt and Samuel injured but still alive. As police cars arrived, Miller knelt beside Samuel, who was bleeding but still conscious. "I'm sorry about Abigail," Miller said quietly. "I really am. She deserved better than what happened to her." Samuel looked up at the detective, his eyes full of tears and resignation. "I just wanted them to pay for what they did to her. I wanted them to suffer the way she suffered." Leon Bell died at the scene from the gunshot wound. Adam Taylor was found guilty of kidnap, assault, and murder, and was given a sentence of 20 years. Samuel was charged with murder and was sentenced to life in prison. A year later, Detective Miller visited Samuel in prison. The grieving father had aged a lot. His hair was now completely gray, and his face showed how much he had suffered. They sat opposite each other in the visiting room, talking quietly about Abigail and the case that had taken over both of their lives. "I think about her every day," Samuel said, his voice barely loud enough to hear. "I dream about her, about the life she should have had. University, a job, maybe having her own family one day." Miller nodded, understanding how much Samuel had lost. "I have a daughter too," he said. "She's about Abigail's age. I can't imagine what you went through." "The worst thing is knowing that I failed her," Samuel said. "I was supposed to protect her, and I let her down. Then I let her down again by becoming a killer." Miller looked at the man in front of him, seeing not a monster, but a father destroyed by grief and the failures of the legal system. "You did what you thought was right," he said finally. "I can't agree with it, but I understand it." As Miller left the prison, he thought about the case that had changed how he saw justice and revenge. Abigail's death had started a chain of events that destroyed a number of families and raised questions about whether the legal system was good enough at protecting the most vulnerable people in society. The docks area where Leon had been hiding was eventually pulled down and turned into a memorial park. A small sign near the entrance was put up to remember Abigail and other victims of violent crime, as a reminder of the human cost of these terrible things. Samuel spent the rest of his life in prison, never asking for parole or appealing his sentence. He used his time to talk to other prisoners about the dangers of violence and the importance of finding peaceful ways to solve problems. His story became a warning about the power of revenge and the need to improve the justice system. Detective Miller continued his career in the police force, taking the lessons he had learned from Abigail's case into every investigation. He became a champion for victims' rights and worked to improve how young offenders were treated, hoping to stop terrible things from happening again. The memory of Abigail lived on in the hearts of those who knew her, a bright light that had been put out too soon by the darkness of human cruelty. Her death had led to changes in local laws about young criminals and protecting victims, making sure that her legacy would be one of positive change. In the end, the violence had taken many victims, leaving behind a community that was changed forever by one young girl's last journey home in the rain. 22,063 characters.